welcome to another episode of Boring History. Today's episode is inspired by the fact that somebody, not mentioning any names, child, but somebody is very likely teething. And what better way to celebrate this joyful, peaceful time than with a story about a guy who had to plant some dragon teeth. And with that marvellous introduction, let's continue with the story of Cadmus, the founder and first king of the ancient city of Thebes. Now, if you're familiar at all with Greek mythology, you've definitely heard of this city as it does feature rather prominently throughout a few Greek myths. In fact, it's actually been suggested that when we think of Thebes, we should be thinking of it in terms of two different cities that are interconnected. So in other words, there's the Thebes of myth and there's the Thebes of history, because it was actually a real place. It's thought that the historical city of Thebes was possibly founded around 700 BC. However, if we loosely interpret some of the things that are told to us by Homer, and apparently even some of the things that you can find in the Linear B tablets, it's possible that the city is quite a bit older. And the last bit of background information before we can begin our story of Cadmus is this. The Thebes that we'll be talking about was situated in the centre of what's known as Old Greece, in the region known as Boeotia. At least I think that's how you say it. And the reason I bring this up is because, just to complicate things, there's also an Egyptian city that was known as Thebes. And this Egyptian Thebes is actually mentioned in Homer's Iliad and was visited by Alexander the Great somewhere towards the end of 330 BC. But this is not the Thebes we'll be talking about today. Which means enough with the history lessons, let's get to the myths that involve dragons. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Europa who was abducted by a giant bull and spirited away across the ocean. Now her father, whose name is apparently pronounced Aenor, was the king of Tyre. Let's just go with Tyre. The king, who was also her father, was also the son of Poseidon, and he wasn't happy that his precious little angel had been spirited away, so he ordered his sons to leave the palace and go and look for their sister. The sons were all like, but Dad! But Aenor was like, nope, I don't want to see any of your faces around here unless you're returning with your sister. Go. And even the king's wife, Telephassa, was like, honey, I think you might be being a little bit ridiculous. Like, why should we lose all of our children just to get one back? Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. But the king's mind would not be changed, which caused Telephassa to say, you're being absolutely ridiculous and I'm not spending one more minute with you. So the sons and their mother went off on the quest to find the sister, and the king was left all on his lonesome. But pretty quickly, the sons realized that it was pretty much impossible to get their sister back. The bull, in case you don't know, had actually been Zeus. And anyway, Europa was completely preoccupied giving birth to the king of Crete, so she was like, I don't even want to be found, guys. Now the brothers were content in their failure, and they're like, you know what, we may as well make the best of this situation, and they ended up settling in various cities all around Greece. Actually, it might have been various countries. I don't think they all stayed in Greece. Technicalities, Cadmus and his mother ended up going to Thrace, where they received a very warm welcome and they led a pretty decent life. When Telephassa died, Cadmus did what most upset Greek people do, and he went to seek the advice of the Delphic oracle. The oracle told him to give up the search for his sister. And Cadmus is like,
well, you know, we've been living kind of comfortably in Thrace all these years, so I kind of thought the whole giving up thing was implied, but yeah, thanks for the confirmation.
Which causes the oracle to be like, oh, well, I'd better up my game, I guess. And the oracle says, I know, you shall go and found a town. And not just that, but in order to find the location of this town, you must follow a cow until it collapses and dies, or falls asleep. Bet you regret back-chatting me now. Cadmus politely says, thank you for the mission, O great oracle, and slowly backs out of the temple. He wanders around for a while, and eventually he stumbles across some cows that bear the sign of the moon on their flank. The sign of the moon, in case you're wondering, is a white circle. Anyway, he picked one of the cows and was like, Pikachu, I choose you, and proceeded to follow this moon cow all around Boeotia. Eventually the cow stopped and Cadmus took a look around and he was like, you know what? Moon cow, you're correct. This is a pretty decent spot to found a town. And thus, the great city of Thebes was founded. Now Cadmus is very grateful that the oracle has been fulfilled, and as thanks he wants to sacrifice the moon cow to Athena. You really have to feel for this cow. I mean, it goes to all the effort of showing Cadmus the perfect place to found a town, and what does it get as thanks? Hamburger patties. Anyway, Cadmus is preparing the sacrifice and he realizes, oh, we need some water or else we can't do the sacrifice. Oh yeah, apparently Cadmus didn't travel alone. He had like a whole posse with him. Anyway, he sent some of his posse off to go and get some water from a nearby spring. This wasn't any old spring. This was the Spring of Ares. It was also guarded by a mighty dragon. Now the dragon had been alone with nothing to eat but fish for quite a while. So of course, if a nice warm meal just happens to walk up to him, who was he to say no? And he proceeds to eat the majority of the water collecting men, which causes Cadmus to be all like, excuse me, I got banished from my home because somebody else kidnapped my sister. So do you really think you can eat all of my men and I'm gonna let it go unpunished? You're dreaming. And with a swish of his sword, he slays the dragon. Now that all the drama and the messy part is over, Athena decides to make an appearance and she tells Cadmus to sow the dragon's teeth. So far, Cadmus has had pretty good luck following instructions, so he's like, hey, why not? What have I got to lose? He plants the teeth and out spring fully armed men, who are later known as the Spartoi. Unfortunately, these men were a little bit scary. They were just grunting and groaning and clanging their shields and swishing their swords. And Cadmus, I mean, he couldn't say for sure, but he was fairly certain that these men were very slowly advancing towards him. At least that's what the gleam in their warrior eyes said. So he has a bright idea to throw a stone into their midst, because you cannot be that bulky and that warrior-like and that decked out in armor and also have a brain. So when the stone gets thrown into the mist, the Spartoi are all like, who did that? Was it you? Was it you? Was it you? And they get into a massive fight with each other and end up killing each other. Well, 5 of them survive. And one of these 5 actually ends up being pretty lucky because he gets to marry one of Cadmus's daughters. Now you would think that the story could end here and, you know, it's pretty complete. But no, of course not. This is a Greek myth and there is still the matter of the slayed dragon. Ares was not at all pleased that his little pet had been killed. And as punishment, or atonement, I guess, depending which way you want to look at it, it was decided that Cadmus should be Ares' slave for 8 long years. And it was at the end of these 8 years that Cadmus finally becomes the first king of Thebes. The city then also falls under the protection of Athena. Now, why she couldn't come and do that earlier? Who knows? And you know what? I don't think they actually say whatever ended up happening to that moon cow. Maybe it did escape sacrifice. Anyway, let's continue and have a look at some of the other goodies that Cadmus received. Zeus actually gave him the goddess Harmonia as a wife, who was the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. I guess he'd impressed his future father-in-law with his strong work ethic. And at the wedding, he also received all sorts of cool gifts, including a robe that was made by the Graces and a necklace that is said to have either been made by the heavenly smith Hephaestus, or the necklace was a present from his sister Europa, who was actually regifting a present that she had received from Zeus. Now both this robe and necklace go on to play a super important role in the story known as 7 Against Thebes. They're given to what's his name to take part in a raid, which starts the whole 7 Against Thebes story thing. But we are not here to discuss the plays of Aeschylus, because I have one more little tidbit of information regarding Cadmus, Thebes, and Dionysus. There are a few different stories regarding the birth of Dionysus, who, in case you're unfamiliar with, is essentially the god of wine and having a good time. One of the more popular stories regarding his birth say that Zeus, who was his father, sent a bolt of lightning to the earth, which ended up blasting Dionysus from the womb of his mother, who also happened to be a daughter of Cadmus. Unfortunately, the bolt of lightning did end up killing Cadmus's daughter, but it did somehow allow the fetus to be magically transported to Zeus's thigh, where it ended up growing to full term, eventually appearing as the fully adult-like god Dionysus. This version of Dionysus' birth meant that he was also a patron city god of the city of Thebes. And this is where I'm going to end today's video, because honestly, the way these myths are all linked together, we could end up going on forever and ever and ever. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing, because I look forward to sharing even more boring history with you in the future.